Hey everyone, it's Ivan, KidBadger.com. We're out here today with part 1 of my carnivore journey. We should probably take a step back. What the hell is carnivore? Think of it as a diet or a lifestyle where, with respect to eating, nutrition, and stuff like that, pretty much a carnivore. So the idea of like nose to tail eating meat and fat and organs to basically get all of those vitamins, nutrients, minerals, pretty much everything you need for your body. No vegetables, no grains, no fruits, none of those other things. Just meat with some salt thrown in. You're like, oh my gosh, you're gonna die. Yes, just like my parents, just like my kids, everyone's gonna die. You're like, no, this is gonna kill you. Probably not, but if it does, you got a front row seat. So what made me look into carnivore and what are some kind of foundations, basics of it? If we were able to step back in time, thousands and thousands of years, the departure of man from the beast side of it. Well, what allowed it, some hypothesize, is meat. You now have something that is incredibly nutrient dense, calorie rich, and that in part allowed our brains to grow and us to become human. Cognitive ability, all those things, brain continually increasing in size. Then eventually we had agriculture and modern agriculture, potentially took a step backwards, we'll see. But with respect to the carnivore diet, the idea is you can basically eat meat, which is incredibly nutrient dense, and nose to tail eating, idea of eating organ meats, fat, meat, connective tissue, all of these things, and it's going to give you pretty much everything you need to be incredibly healthy and thrive. You're like, but what about all these wonderful plants? Good point. So think about it this way. You have a deer. Have you ever tried to catch a deer? Turns out they're actually really fast and hard to catch, which you could argue is a defense mechanism. Their ability to run, speed, right? On the other hand, have you ever tried to catch a plant? Super easy to catch. You just reach down and you grab that thing. So they do not have any speed. And aside from maybe thorns, something along those lines, not a ton along the lines of defense mechanism, except they pretty much all contain some sort of toxin, some more so than others. Granted, we've gotten pretty good at figuring out which ones will kill us, which ones we can probably eat without causing too much harm to us. But I mean, even look at tomatoes. If you go eat the leaves of a tomato plant, like, you're probably gonna die. It's part of the nightshade family. And you're like, well, some things want to be eaten. You could make that argument, like apples, for example. The apple tree is like, I want to reproduce. I'm going to make this sweet fruit. It is going to incentivize something to come eat it, but I'm also going to make the seeds poisonous. You eat enough apple seeds, they will kill you. I want to say it's cyanide inside of them. But so it's like, hey, eat this fruit and then go crap it out in a big pile of fertilizer, and don't consume the seeds though, because I'm going to make those poisonous. So if you try and actually eat those, it'll kill you. But now my seeds are in a big pile of fertilizer, we can grow another tree. Awesome. And honestly, most plants have all kinds of different toxins that usually don't react well in our body. And so we have all kinds of inflammation, people with leaky gut, all these different side effects. I mean, all the gluten intolerance, all of these different things. Like they're basically, it's essentially plants' defense mechanisms. And that's how it plays out in our body. So what is the idea? Well, basically with eating nutrient dense meat, no, like there isn't that in there. Think about this. If you go out into the wild and you go catch and kill an animal, you can pretty much eat the whole thing, like no issues. I wouldn't eat coyotes. I don't think anything actually eats coyotes except like little tiny bugs, but pretty much eat any animal. Conversely, you go out, pretty much anything you can find, you can't eat. Like, it will make you sick, if not kill you. Like, no, like plants do not want to be eaten. Granted, it's hard to catch animals because they don't want to get eaten either. But the idea of plants, a lot of the stuff is not bioavailable, so even when you eat it, it's like, oh, this is really high in this vitamin or something. Not necessarily bioavailable. Conversely, Pretty much all the meat and all the nutrients in them are bioavailable, really easy for our body to pick up and absorb. So 30,000 foot view, carnivore. What are some of the benefits of carnivore? One, basically inflammation. So a lot of people knowingly or unknowingly have different types of gastrointestinal issues, where leaky gut, things along those lines, where basically the stuff you're eating, all of those toxins, interfering with the lining of your gut wall, and it leads to inflammation, which basically leads to all kinds of other things throughout the body. A lot of ailments basically come back to diet, and with that, inflammation. Another thing that can happen is, depending on how you eat, you can eat yourself into diabetes, which a lot of America has, or even be like pre-diabetic, where basically the body's not very good with respect to insulin and things like that. So if you're eating carnivore, you're eating basically protein and fat, well, you don't end up with these different spikes with blood sugar, because your body is no longer reliant on carbohydrates with respect to being able to create energy. It gets really efficient in burning fat that you've either have stored, or burning fat that you're consuming to use as fuel, which is awesome because, again, you don't end up with these crashes, with these highs and lows with respect to energy levels, things along those lines. Why am I doing this? Well, in part because I'm kind of curious. One of the books I read was The Carnivore Code. Some of it's really interesting, especially kind of like the historical look at our ancestors eating meat leading to XYZ. Some of it just goes into the weeds, where unless you're a doctor, it's just kind of like, okay, what you're trying to say is it's better with respect to this system in my body. Like, some of it is incredibly high level that was beyond me. But overall, pretty good read. And for me personally, looking at this whole thing is, one, you don't know what you don't know. So I don't think I necessarily have like gut issues or anything like that, but I don't know. So do I have a bunch of inflammation going on? I don't think so. I think I'm overall probably pretty healthy, but until that goes away, like, what's the metric for it? So we'll see. We'll see if I do feel better. We'll see if I did have inflammation that I no longer have, like, as this progresses. The other side of it is just performance and overall health. I know at times probably don't eat the healthiest stuff. I'll go sit down and be like, oh, I'll have a pint of ice cream. Maybe I'll have two. And knowingly, because I enjoy it, I'm like, oh, let's do this, but it's not good for me. And to that end, no, it'll be interesting to see also with respect to health and physical performance, because I like to go do stuff. And I also work out pretty regularly, and being able to see from where I was to where I am with respect to even just athletic performance for me as well. Ivan, how will you know if this works or if there's improvement or anything like that? Well, benchmarks. So basically creating some sort of starting point, some sort of metric to look at. So to that end, yesterday, as of filming this, mid-January 2021, I ended up going to the doctor, got a blood lab pulled. So that's off at the lab. That is essentially my starting point, my original benchmark. With that, also got taped, like abdomen, at the belly button, thigh, right arm, and this right here is what I look like in shorts. Why? Because I want to show you what I look like in shorts? No, because while I weighed myself initially, and I weighed about 187 pounds with shorts and a t-shirt on, moving forward, depending on if I gain weight or lose weight, who knows? Ultimately, it comes down to body composition, because I could very well gain weight, and then the metric of, hey, this is how much I weigh, doesn't really mean anything, because I'm like, oh, that's weird, like I gained weight, but it might just be body composition changing. And I think the biggest one and the most interesting one, though, will honestly just be the blood work. So I'm going to revisit this in about a month. I will end up getting another lab drawn, and once those results are back, I will go meet with my doctor and talk through them with my doctor. And I'll bring you along for the ride, and we'll look at essentially where I was when I started. I was eating just whatever I chose to eat. And then where I am, basically about a month in, and kind of leapfrog that through until I decide to stop this journey, or I just decide to stop documenting this journey. But probably a good 6 months, maybe a year. We'll see how far it goes. Ivan, but what are you going to be eating? Meat and salts and drinking water. When I say meat, I mean deer and elk put away from this hunting season, to include hearts and livers that I got from those. And in addition to that, probably some other organs that I will source, either that or even desiccated organs in the form of pills, depending on if I can source organ meat or not. In addition to that, probably some beef, like grass-fed, grass-finished. Same thing with probably some like heritage pork, like non-GMO stuff, non-GMO eggs. Just ordered myself a 5-gallon bucket of grass-fed, grass-finished beef tallow to cook with. And yeah, it's pretty much gonna be meat and salt and water. And majority, or at least half of probably calorie intake is probably gonna be fat. So protein and fat. Ivan, how are you gonna go poop? I don't know. I will bring you along for that journey, figuratively. You know what, like here's the thing. People have this like probably mixed up notion in their mind that's like, you need to eat all this fiber so that you can have a bowel movement. Pretty sure that's not true, but I'll let you know. Who knows? Maybe I'll never poop again, but probably not. I'm sure some of you guys are like, man, that sounds so boring, eating meat and salt and water. Well, twofold. On the one hand, probably gonna end up eating about 2 meals a day, because eating protein and fat, incredibly satiating. And you're not doing the carbohydrates, fat, and salt, think potato chips, where you just eat them for days, jacks up your blood sugar, messes all your insulin levels up, and that amazing combination, which has been capitalized on by fast food restaurants, everyone else, basically suppresses your body's signals saying, hey, like we're hungry. So you're never satiated. Conversely, eating carnivore, really satiating. And recipes. I actually just bought this incredible book, really excited to kind of dip into some of the recipes. If you want kind of a primer on carnivore, I would encourage you to get it. Or if you just honestly want an amazing coffee table cookbook, I would also encourage you to get it. Beautiful images in there, really cool recipes, all kinds of different things in there, to include a lot of stuff with respect to like bone marrow, incredibly nutrient dense. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting in there and yeah, not eating boring stuff as I go through this journey. Big picture, I'm really looking forward to going on this journey. I think it's gonna be awesome. In part, it'll be good for me, just personally, to take a really solid look at my health and well-being. As much control as we would like to say we have, like over ourselves, over our surroundings, you have almost no control. If there's one place that you could argue you actually have control, it's what your hand puts into your mouth. And a lot of people are living arguably less than ideal, probably less happy lives than they would otherwise be living if they honestly just took better care of themselves, myself included, I think. And so to that end, it'll be really good to have something I'm going to kind of focus on and stick with and move through. I'll end up keeping a food log as far as what I end up eating when, and kind of baseline as far as how I'm feeling throughout the day, probably. I imagine maybe notes as far as good night's sleep, stuff like that. I'm able to track that with my watch too, which would be handy, be able to write down kind of a little sleep log as well, I guess. But definitely looking forward to going on this journey. If you would like to check out either of those books I mentioned, there'll be links down below. You can check them out. Like I said, the one, Carnivore Code, kind of gets into the weeds. The cookbook, beautiful cookbook, and honestly, it's just like a really good kind of primer, like cliff notes on what carnivore is. Might be a little easier to dip into there. But I would encourage you to check it out if you have any interest. I want to, again, checking back in with you probably about a month from now, as of like getting this video out, be able to sit down with my doctor. We'll go over my blood labs, see where things are at, and yeah, just kind of continue the journey. So we'll see what happens. If you do enjoy my content, want to support it, I would greatly appreciate it. Number of different ways, whether going over to kitbadger.com, picking up targets, K-back target pads, stickers, any of that stuff, or support me directly through Patreon. Appreciate all of that. And if you have questions, more than happy to answer them. Probably not down in the YouTube comments. I'm not going to go wade in there to try and answer your question, but if you want to come over to Patreon, we also have a Discord over there. Happy to answer all your questions over there. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.
All systems to stop right here, so we are as pretend. So many things could be a mystery.